Hi guys, it's Mrs. Longmire here. In our previous lessons, we've been learning about how readers compare text. They list the details and thoughts from text A on one side of the T chart. They list the details and thoughts from text B on the other side of the T chart. And then they group related information by categories down the middle. And we talked about in fiction text, those categories down the middle never change. They're always the story elements: character, setting, problem, solution, theme. They never change. But last time we talked about comparing nonfiction text or informational text. And the categories down the middle do change depending on what you're comparing. So we compared emperor penguins to beluga whales because those were some animals that we had been reading about in previous lessons. And the categories down the middle that we used for these two animals were: where do they live, what do they eat, what do they look like, and what do you know about their babies. And then your assignment was to compare two more animals, the snowy owl with the polar bear, and find what's the same and what's different about those two animals with using these categories. The categories really help you to know what kind of details you're looking for in a text, so you can pull out the details for each category. Well, sometimes readers want to write about what they learned and when they're comparing two things. And so in today's lesson, we're going to talk about how you could write about that. Now, when we talked about writing in fiction text, we talked about taking one row at a time and writing about that row, looking at that category and writing what they have the same in that category and what is different in that category. And so we talked about using the form we have been using recently, where we have the box at the top. I'll show you on my screen here. The box at the top where you can draw your picture, and then lines underneath where you can write your words. That's the same form that we're going to use today when we write about the similarities and differences in the emperor penguin and the beluga whale. And I'm going to show you what this could look like with a couple of rows. I'll model for you, and then you can help me on the last two rows before you try it yourself. Okay? So if we look at our first row, where do they live? I'm going to show you what this could look like in writing. Well, we said the emperor penguin lives in Antarctica, which is the South Pole, kind of at the bottom of our world here. And the beluga whale lives in the Arctic Ocean in the North Pole. So kind of opposite ends of the world from where penguins live. But we did say both animals do live in cold oceans, icy oceans. So I drew a picture I kind of drew a line down the middle. And on this side, I drew a picture of the emperor penguin, and I drew an arrow to Antarctica, but he's living close to the ocean, right? Then I drew the beluga whale on this side, but I used an arrow to point to the Arctic Ocean where he lives up here, and he lives in the cold ocean water. So if I write about what's the same, I could say, well, they both live in icy water, icy ocean water, right? Both emperor penguins and beluga whales live in icy water. But they're different because they live in opposite ends of the world, right? So, however, they are different because they live on different ends of the world. So they're the same because they both live in icy water, ocean water, but they're the same because they live in different parts of the world. So see how I wrote about one row? I want you to watch me do this again. We're going to do the second row here. And the second category was, what do they eat? What do they eat? So we said emperor penguins eat fish, beluga whales eat fish, and other creatures, octopus, crabs, etc. So if I drew a picture, I drew a picture of the emperor penguin eating a fish, and I drew a picture of the beluga whale eating a fish and an octopus or a squid, right? So if I wanted to write how they're the same, they both eat fish. So I put both emperor penguins and beluga whales eat fish. One sentence about how they're the same with what they eat. But then I said, however, this is where however is a good word to use when you're getting ready to show something that's different. However, beluga whales also eat crabs, octopus, and other creatures. So that's how they're a little bit different. They also eat other creatures. Beluga whales probably eat a lot more than penguins too because they're a lot bigger, right? I could have written a sentence about that. Maybe I should. I'll add that. Beluga whales eat more than emperor penguins. I'm going to add that detail as well. They eat more because they eat fish and other creatures. Beluga whales eat more than emperor penguins. Okay? So we wrote about how they're the same. They both eat fish. And then, however, beluga whales also eat crabs and octopus and other creatures, and they eat more than emperor penguins. Are you ready to try this with the next row? Okay, the next row said, what do they look like? What do they look like? We said emperor penguins are black, white, and orange. They have waterproof feathers and flippers. Beluga whales are huge. They have a blowhole on top of their head so they can breathe. They're white. They have blubber, which is that fat underneath the skin. And they have flippers. So if we drew a picture first, we're going to draw our picture. I drew a picture of the emperor penguin. I made sure to include his flippers and his little beak there. And he's black and white and orange. And then I drew the beluga whale. And I drew him bigger, right, with his flippers and his tail. Okay? So now, what could we write about what they have the same? Do they have anything the same? And what could our sentence look like? Well, they both do have white, right? They both have white coloring on them. Both emperor penguins and beluga whales have flippers and have white coloring. Is that what you said? They both have flippers and they both have white. That's what they have the same. Is that what you said? They both have flippers and white coloring. How are they different? Could you say? Well, penguins are different because they have feathers, black on them, and they're smaller, right? They have feathers and beluga whales don't have feathers. They have black on them and beluga whales don't have black on them. And they're smaller. Beluga whales are huge, right? So that's how they're different. Penguins are different because they have feathers, they have black, and they're smaller. Great job. Ready to try one more? The last row there is about what do we know about their babies? For emperor penguins, we said they hatch from eggs. They weigh less than a pound when they're born. Mom and dad take turns watching the babies and feeding them, right? Beluga whales are gray, then turn white. They live in pods with their parents, and they're 176 pounds at birth. So if we drew pictures first, right? I drew a picture of the baby emperor penguin. There's the egg that he hatched from, his mom and his dad. Remember, they sing little songs to each other. That's how they recognize their mom and dad. There they are. The beluga whale is in a pod with his parents, right? So how are they the same? How are baby beluga whales and baby emperor penguins the same? Look at the picture. Did you say they both live with their parents? Yeah. Penguins and beluga whales both live with their parents when babies. How are they different? Did you say the beluga whale is way bigger? They're 176 pounds. They don't even weigh a pound, right? So beluga whales are way bigger. What else? How else are they different? Did you say penguins hatch from eggs? Beluga whales don't hatch from eggs. They're born from their mom, right? So penguins hatch from eggs and beluga whales don't. That's how they're different. Beluga whales are way bigger and penguins hatch from eggs and beluga whales don't. So we wrote about how they're the same. They both live with their parents, and how they're different. Beluga whales are a lot bigger and penguins hatch from eggs and beluga whales don't. See how this works? You go one row at a time. You draw a picture first to show those details that you collected, right? And then you think, how are they the same in this category? And how are they different? And then write sentences about each. A sentence about how they're the same and a sentence or two about how they're different. So if you were in Mrs. Longmire's class, I would have you continue practice writing from the T-chart with nonfiction text. I would have you go back to your polar bear and snowy owl T-chart that you completed last time, where you pull details out of the epic book for kids on polar bears and snowy owls from that book that we read. Where do they live? What do they eat? What do they look like? And what do you know about their babies? Same categories that we used for the penguin and the whale. So I would pull that T-chart back out and then practice, maybe pick a row or two and practice writing about how they're the same and how they're different. So we have that writing template that you can trace around, or you can just draw your own. If you don't have a printer and can't print that out, draw a box and maybe divide that box down the middle, right? So you can draw your snowy owl on one side and your polar bear on the other. And then pick a category and write some sentences about how they're the same, how the owl and the polar bear are the same, and how they're different. That's what I would have you do if you were Mrs. Longmire's class, but your teacher might have an even better idea.